Zoology news, we decided to mix it up.
We were having technical difficulties.
It's on LinkedIn or Twitch. You will unfortunately have to wait until the end of this, where we'll be streaming again. Basically just restreaming this because we weren't able to do it the normal way. So we like to try risky new things, but occasionally there are consequences. So if you're confused about why we're only on one platform today, that's the reason. So sorry about that, but we will go live on everything else as soon as this YouTube broadcast is done. So today we're going to be going over the top news and also some developments in some of the hardware that Alex and I have been collaborating on that we talked to you about, I think, either last week or the week before. And unfortunately, there's some bad news about that development. So if you switch over to my screen, you'll see that unfortunately our order was scrapped. So we're going to have to, it was a big inconvenience, and we're going to have to wait until probably next week to give you guys another update on our PCB project. So, yeah, like
it's a big inconvenience.
Yeah,
for
it's very sad when your project gets scrapped in production, but it just happens sometimes. So we're really excited about the Hashcat, Longcat, and Nugget projects we've been working on, and we've kind of teased a couple images of those, but we'll have to update you next time for how that's going, because unfortunately, you know, when you work with physical products, things do happen. But we have been working on some other stuff that's really cool related to that, and that's color change PLA filament. So again, this is not really hacker news related, but if you're a maker or if you're looking for some really cool stuff, we've been using these to make the cases for some of our upcoming devices, and I've just been kind of amazed by how cool this stuff is. So here you can see a couple examples. One of them is going from orange to yellow, and the other one is going from green to yellow. They actually kind of turn like the same color of yellow, which is interesting because like if you put them together and then get them both hot, you can't really tell which is which. But yeah, if you're looking for an interesting material to play with, I just wanted to shout this out because we not only had good success printing with it, but it's just really cool. And I almost always have one of these like color change objects just like in my pocket or like around me to fidget with, because it's so cool to just look at it and see that it's reacted to like your thumb or something like that. So anyway, really cool, very interesting to play around with. And I also want to thank all of the people in our chat for contributing things like this. The clip of Alex getting attacked by a spider during our last stream. So if you didn't think that we don't have great moments, then you know you obviously haven't been tuning in, because this is us, getting attacked by a spider. And it was a big spider. It was a really big spider. I think I'm about to indicate how big that spider actually is, but it was like, you know, it's like this big. It's like the size of a quarter. Not something you want on your lap. Yeah, so thank you to the person who clipped this. It's beautiful, and I'm glad we have immortalized. See, that's exactly how big it was. I'm glad that we have now stayed this forever. Okay, so let's move on to some hacker news. Actually, sorry, this is more stuff Alex and I are doing. So we're going to be doing some upcoming stuff on war flying. And Alex, can you explain what war flying is?
Yeah, so it's a derivative of war driving, which is basically when you pair Wi-Fi with GPS coordinates. So essentially, if you like drive around or like walk or something like that, and you were to just like gather basically a footprint of like the digital landscape around you, like where Wi-Fi networks are located, basically you can pull this data into programs after your like war driving session and basically post-process it to see like where certain Wi-Fi networks are located, various information about them, so you can see like their encryption type, what devices are connected to the network, other stuff like that. So for this proof of concept, we're basically going to strap a GPS and Wi-Fi module to a drone instead to basically speed the process up. And we're just going to like take it for a spin and see like what Wi-Fi networks are around really quickly.
Yeah, so we're looking at some really cool signals intelligence implications of this. Like if you have a drone at your disposal, and I'm just using a very light and, well, for me it was cheap because I got it for free, but relatively cheap drone to just strap the bare minimum of what you need onto the bottom and take it around to see if you can get patterns in the data. So right now we just did a very basic test flight where we took this module, which is literally just a D1 Mini, a SD card module, and a GPS module. Am I missing anything?
Did you mention SD card?
Oh, yeah, an
okay.
SD card module.
Yeah.
So aside from the, like, that's really all you need for this. So because there are hats available for the D1 Mini, where these all just kind of plug into each other, notably except for the GPS, as you can see with these wires, I was able to just rig together something that weighed about an ounce and stick this onto a drone. So this is what that actually looked like. It did not look pretty, but it works. It definitely works. So we went ahead and took this outside. I put a little bit of tape around it to secure it more in place and make it a little bit more resistant to being knocked around. And I flew this around the neighborhood, and I was able to actually retrieve information about Wi-Fi networks and all sorts of devices just by flying around and then coming right back. Now, the drone didn't really like it that much, but it didn't complain too much. It just, the battery seemed to drain faster, and it kept telling me that it was detecting like pontoons or like with propeller guards. So basically the drone is already configured to accept some sorts of add-ons in order to protect the propellers or make it so that it can land on water. So because there's already a built-in mode called payload mode, you can actually use this to do some flights with this on it. And if the payload is too heavy, the drone will actually auto-detect it and then start going into payload mode, which I found out limits you to like 98 feet or something like that. Now, that's important because the drone is really loud at 98 feet. But if you go up to something like 200 feet, 250, then the drone's actually pretty quiet and you can still get a lot of Wi-Fi data. So, I would prefer to have a drone that was at like 250 feet, like flying kind of high, collecting Wi-Fi data somewhat inconspicuously, not making that much noise, than like a low rumbling drone that thunders through people's backyards and startles them. So like, it's just like, I would be terrified if like a drone came in all low, like with a giant payload like this hanging off of it, making a huge buzzing noise. It's probably one of the more terrifying things I could expect to have happen in my backyard. So yeah, I would definitely not want to see one of these that low. So there are some restrictions with using like a tiny little drone like this, and also trying to cut down the weight as much as possible. So one project that Alex and I have decided to work on is creating a PCB version that's as light as possible, that basically makes it really easy to slap this on the bottom of an existing drone like this DJI Mini 2, and make it so that it can fly around and record data to an SD card. So yeah, this is just a project that we're working on. If you guys have any suggestions, we would really like to make this somewhat easy for beginners to follow along with, but making it light does have some constraints. So we're going to try to make it less than this 1 ounce thing that I've created that apparently weighs as much as a pair of pontoons.
Nice.
So yeah, if you guys have any suggestions for this, then it's going to be an interesting project and we will keep you updated as we go. All right, so getting into some hacker news, one thing that one thing I want to do before we get into the hacker news is just give another shout out to Etienne Jacob. I love his animations so much. These are all programmatic, so if you've never seen these before, you can actually learn how to program these relatively simply because he makes guides on his GitHub. So I just love to shout these out because they're mesmerizing and they're super good. So check out Etienne Jacob if you want to see some really cool code-derived art. All right, so let's talk about shot spotters. Alex, you are from California, where these are prolific. Do you know what these are?
Yeah, it's, as far as I know, it's basically just like sound detecting infrastructure that's like set up in a few cities around like California that basically triangulate the sound of gunshots by like profiling certain sounds like very specific to how a gunshot sounds. So basically, like if someone were to just be like "ra-ta-ta-ta," shoot off a gun in the city or something dumb like that, like it would just like come find you and you'd get tracked by the cyber police.
Yeah. So this has been a fixture for a really long time, and this is part of a larger, I guess you would call it like surveillance infrastructure that exists in cities. I wanted to lead with this and then show off this really excellent article by the EFF showing off the various types of urban surveillance that exist, because a lot of people that live in cities don't know the kinds of like layers of surveillance that they live under. So this might mean everything from like satellite surveillance to cell phone surveillance, and this visualization makes it really easy for people to kind of understand like who might be intercepting your data, why they might be doing it, and what kinds of ways a city might be tracking you. So just looking through this, I love the visualization because you can see some of the like warrantless ways police can also gather data. And then this guy, all the way at the bottom. So it just keeps going. And this is a great way for people to get familiar with the types of surveillance that are out there. Satellite photography, obviously, internet traffic surveillance. This is from like the internet service provider. This is what people tell you to like use a VPN or something to try to evade. Cellular communication surveillance. Of course, this kind of information can be legally collected, or they can just create like a fake cell phone tower, which is something that happens increasingly in American cities, especially in Southern California. Drones. So we've been learning a lot about all sorts of police agencies buying drones or operating drones for lots of different reasons. And some of them are relatively benign, and some of them have really, really kind of broad scope where they can just use them for kind of whatever they want. With the repurposing of, for example, like a bomb diffusing bomb to like end a standoff by blowing a guy up with a bomb one time, like it's a little concerning that police departments are using these more and more, just because like, okay, like it just seems like if the tool's there and it can be used in another way in an emergency, they'll just do it, and then there's a precedent for that happening in the future. Like a drone is a whole new platform to worry about. As I was saying, like having a drone rumbling through your yard might be very alarming and cause people to inadvertently curse by accident. And you know, if you were in your backyard, like nude sunbathing or something, and a police drone like flew around like on a hot pursuit somewhere all low, and then that data was like subpoenaed in like a public, or was otherwise made public, that would, okay, that's a pretty lame example, but still, like there are other ways where having lots of drones in public spaces and having just everything enter into public record means that like there's no expectation of privacy even in your own yard anymore. Even if you have a big fence, if there's police drones that are legal and they're going over all the time, like, what's really the barrier? We have social media surveillance. This is stuff that I teach when I do OSINT. So that's how different agencies are able to automate data collection on certain people or certain screen names or other things that tie people together online. And also traffic cameras. Traffic cameras are something that a lot of people forget about, but often these cameras are connected to intelligence. So you have sketchy companies out there who will do facial recognition. They'll do license plate collection. License plate collection is probably the easiest because the cameras really don't need to be that high resolution, but there are lots of cities that are upgrading to higher resolution cameras that are capable of doing things like facial recognition. And that's of a lot of interest to, well, pretty much anybody that wants to track movement. So yeah, it's very important to note that every time you go through an intersection that has one of these cameras, it's very likely that your license plate is being logged. So if you were to, maybe not tell the truth about where you were, if you were in a city, the odds are it would be relatively easy for someone to find out if you were lying. So just something to note, that this sort of persistent like camera surveillance is now tied into automated systems that build databases every time you go through an intersection. So, I also hear stories of agencies making it really easy for other police agencies, even if they have no reason to collect the automated license plate data from any agency they want. So if you're some small, police agency, you can just go and automatically request access to data from lots of larger police departments, even if you don't have a very good reason, even if you just kind of feel like it. So yeah, this is something that a lot of people forget about, but a lot of the time these cameras aren't just, tied to, video recording, they're also tied to identify, tag, and store data in a video feed.
It's scary, like how many different like metrics they can gather on you. And tie together all these data sources to just like pinpoint information about you that are so subtle, like something just like your license plate can be used to figure out like where you were at like what time.
Yeah, it's just people like, oh, I evaded surveillance, I drove and no one saw me. It's like, no, if you went through intersections that have these cameras, like lots of crimes are solved by this. A lot of like hit and runs are solved by this, where there's like a very vague vehicle description, and they can go back and basically query the license plate data, look at the vehicle registration, and rule out anything that wasn't in the area. It's really sophisticated. So there's a lot of crimes that are solved by this. There's a lot of dumb people that get caught by this. And it's just because most people aren't aware that the traffic cameras are building a database about your movement that is very easy for any investigator in the country to access, provided they have some sort of law enforcement tie and they can make the right inquiry. The data is not, it doesn't require a warrant in most cases. It's considered like data that can be accessed by a legal police agency, provided they have a reason. So a reason is not a warrant. And that means that this sort of information can be accessed much more readily than other sorts of surveillance data. And that's kind of why I, in particular, am kind of wowed by how much police are using automated license plate scanners, the data is just way more easy for them to access than any sort of information that would require like more of a warrant or like some other more probable cause. They, provided they have a reason to be searching, can really just start doing searches in that database without a lot of needing to provide like justification. So that's the danger of automated license plate scanners, is that people don't know about them and they don't consider them when they're doing stuff. So it's easy to like, forget something and be like, I'm sure I was there, and then maybe not have actually been there. And then there's evidence where you were either not being truthful or forgot or something, but you could immediately be caught in a mistruth, even if it's an unintentional one, by this sort of surveillance that people don't really remember. So another one is surveillance of cell phones. We talked a little bit about like either you can be the provider going through the data and looking at metadata, or you could be someone who's creating a fake cell phone tower and forcing people to connect. Automated license plate readers was a whole separate one, but of course there's also cameras that just do camera stuff. I just in particular don't like the automated license plate readers. I think not enough people know about them, and like they are so easy to collect data with. You can literally run your own Raspberry Pi project and make your own little like homegrown surveillance state if you wanted to. And there's like little private communities and stuff that do. There's malls that do, and then resell that data to government agencies. So it's just really worth it to know, like if there's a camera pointed at your license plate, exactly what's happening behind that. And then, of course, we just talked about acoustic gunshot detection, which Alex explained so eloquently. That's when you have boxes that are designed to look for a specific sound and triangulate it. And in this case, usually for gunshots. So these sorts of acoustic surveillance devices can, always be repurposed for other things, because they're perfectly capable of hearing conversations and other sorts of things that are happening in the neighborhoods that they're installed in, which are predominantly like poor neighborhoods. So it's just, if you put a bunch of microphones, it could be used to intercept communications, and then like say you're only going to use them for one thing, naturally people might be a little suspicious if the capability is there and people just promise not to use it. And then of course we have a new threat, which is internet connected security cameras. This is something where like Ring cameras, all these other like doorbell cameras it's possible to just pipe them into like a police data feed, and lots of people are encouraged to do that by police with a bunch of these hybrid programs that allow police agencies to request either directly from doorbells that are near like an area where a crime happened, or to actually have people continuously stream to something that the police can see. That's an opt-in process, but it's still getting to the point where it's very easy for police to just request this without necessarily like a warrant or any specific reason. So they're basically able to do mass requests for surveillance data from lots of homeowners who might not actually have any idea what actually like happened that they're looking for. And this is kind of a problem now, because we have lots of privately owned surveillance data that is easily accessible by police and doesn't really require a warrant. So this is something that, because it's people's individual data, or the fact that we've now created a process for police to request this without, again, very much information, means that people might be sharing information they might not want to share if they knew what it was for or how it might be used. So this is, again, a problem that's relatively recent. We didn't have lots of like home internet connected doorbells that were like readily available to police to just query if they know that there's one in the area. But these are something that are solving crimes, and that's why people continue to use them and police continue to rely on them. Because just like automated license plate data, this doesn't require a lot to request. You can just ask people, and if they say no, like there's no real cost for that if you're able to do it at scale. So police are kind of trending towards using this data that they don't have to go through a big long process to access. But that's kind of a problem for people, because it means there's a lot of data that's being exposed without them necessarily knowing it. And then of course we have electronic monitoring. That's the sort of thing with like ankle monitors. There's lots of stuff with that. Police, did you know like police can just put like a GPS device, like if you go across the border, and no warrant. Like they can just do that. So there's some specific things about this, but it is pretty startling that police can just put a GPS tracker on your vehicle if you are going like across the border, because lots of people do that for normal reasons.
It's weird.
So yeah, it's there are some caveats to what police can and can't do when you do certain things, again, like cross the border. So that's an interesting thing I wasn't aware of.
Do they have to disclose that to you? Because that's really concerning.
No,
okay.
They do not, because that would spoil it. If they're just like, hey, buddy, I put a tracker on that car. Don't you do anything bad? Like, that's just like, I don't think that I don't think that that's the strategy they're going with. And then finally, like, we have international internet traffic surveillance. This is something where there were a lot, I can't say the specific company names on the stream, but there were a lot of companies who were found to be like intercepting data that was entering the country or going in and out of the country on behalf of certain agencies. And this is because that data is really valuable, and being able to comb through it super quickly means that you would be able to do a lot of surveillance. And of course, that is something that's very attractive. So these are just some of the different infrastructure that might be tracking you in a city, or really anywhere at this point, but you'll find almost all of these in like Los Angeles or Orange County or some of the places we're familiar with. And that's why, you know, it's important to be aware of this stuff and know what it is when you see it, because I started seeing pickup trucks driving around my college campus with automated license plate scanners. And I realized there was a whole black market of people selling automated license plate data to repo people, and then making it so anybody who's looking for a car that, you know, they're trying to repo knows where it is. So there's like lots of interesting stuff going on when it comes to surveillance. All right, so let's go over here. I'm going to, apparently I am supposed to full screen this. There we go.
Also, someone wants the URL to the article we were just at. If you
Sure
drop
can
that.
do. Yeah, I will. I'll do it just for you, whoever you are. Look at that. In real time, boom, in the chat. All right, cool. So moving on, we do not have a Discord service, but I'm always on the lookout for good communities and good places for people to be able to, you know, find like-minded people. In this case, Hashcat started an official Discord. Again, I don't really use Discord that much, but I think it's super cool that they started it because there's a big community around Hashcat, and lots of people that I interviewed for our Hackers Talk About Their Favorite Tools selected Hashcat as their favorite tool just because it's so versatile. It has so many different things it can do. Yeah, so like I think it's actually in our Hack 5 episode, like hackers pick their top Wi-Fi hacking tool, something like that. Like it was pretty frequently selected just because people could do lots of stuff with it. So yeah, if you want to find a good community with other people that like, well, cracking hashes, I would imagine, then there is the official Hashcat Discord, which you can also find. They just tweeted it out from their @Hashcat Twitter account. So yeah, good resource, and I'm sure you'll find some people with some interesting ideas. All right, so let's talk about bug bounties. There's really kind of two types of bug bounties. There's real bug bounties that are like through a program, and then people who are forced to create a bug bounty program to prevent someone from destroying their company. This one kind of seems like it might have been that one, and there's a lot of indications here that very similar to the way that a network transportation company or rideshare provider, one might say, paid out a really, really large bug bounty to a hacker who basically just threatened them. And in response, they got in a bunch of trouble for it because you're not supposed to do that, and it encourages criminals to continue to do that sort of thing. So in this case, $500,000 is a lot. Like, I don't know many people that have gotten a $500,000 bug bounty for real that also didn't have some sort of criminal prosecution coming. But hey, congratulations this one time to that person, because it seems like, you know, provided nothing bad happens from this, then, you know, it went really well. But in my opinion, I don't think this is going to go very well. Because they took $340 million. So wow. In this particular cryptocurrency attack, and I wish we had our cryptozoology expert here to comment on if Bigfoot could have been involved. It looks like this person was able to exploit a flaw and move $610 million away from this cryptocurrency platform. And then they're like, oh, what a good job you did at finding the security flaw. Why don't you just go ahead and keep 500,000 of that and we just not call the police? And they were just like, yeah, okay. So they've currently returned $340 million, which is, you might note, not $600 million.
Yeah.
So, like, it also seems like the person that they're talking to, Mr. White Hat, as they're referring to him.
That's very generous.
Yeah. Well, I think it's forced. Yeah, because, like, Mr. White Hat has not returned the rest of it. They're still like kind of anxiously waiting to see if that's going to happen. But it's kind of funny because they're just like, hey, Mr. Criminal, you go ahead and keep that 500, but like, you know, please, come on, the fun's over, give the rest back. And they're just like, no, we're not joking. Hello? Are you there? Hello? It's like, so this is kind of like an ongoing situation with them trying to get that other $300 million worth of cryptocurrency back. So ongoing crypto drama and ongoing bug bounty drama. Again, this does not seem like a bug bounty. It more seems like they just didn't want them to keep all of the money. So, all right, we're also getting a request for the Hashcat link, so I'm going to drop this into the chat. You guys have excellent taste, so I should probably provide all these links, but there you go. All right. So that is the link to the Hashcat community. Hopefully you guys like it. Again, we are not able to do a Discord because it takes too much maintenance and we just don't have the time. But I love seeing when other creators are doing it, and Hashcat has a great group of people behind it, so I imagine it should be pretty cool. All right, so let's talk about exposures on the internet. So if you did the right search, then you could just find out, who was on a no-fly list. You ever been curious if you were on the no-fly list? Well, guess what? You could find out. So lots of different, so this was apparently a 1.9 million data set containing sensitive information on people, including their names, countries of citizenship, gender, date of birth, passport details, and no-fly status. So really the no-fly status and the passport details is the most, important part here. Like, because at this point, this does so much bad. You have people targeting the no-fly people with spam and whatever else, trying to harass them. You now have the no-fly people know that they're no-fly people. Yeah, that's not good. So it looks like this was stored by a third party, but the government was notified, and then 3 weeks later they took it down. So they're just like, hey, highly sensitive data up online, it's yours, gotta take it down. And DHS was like, gotcha. And then 3 weeks later, they took that data set down. So, yikes. Yeah, so that's not a good data set to have out there, obviously. In this case, the implications of this are kind of national security related. It's just interesting to see how quickly this data is taken down when it's exposed online. I mean, in this case, it was noticed relatively quickly and then turned into the correct agency, but that still didn't mean that it wasn't going to be up for another 3 weeks. So, sometimes it's hard to just find out who had uploaded this or whose infrastructure this is, if they're working with a lot of contractors maybe. I'm kind of just trying to come up with a reason why it might take 3 weeks to take down a no-fly list. Okay, so what happens when you use incognito mode, Alex?
I'd say pretty much close to nothing. It just doesn't save your history, but in terms of security, I would say close to nothing.
Yeah, it's not very useful except for making your browser session private to other users of the same computer. So I just wanted to it was kind of interesting seeing this bubble up, because when I first started using incognito mode, I also thought that it did something extra, but it's just worth reiterating what incognito mode really is. And this is something that, again, just is useful to remind yourself. If you're using incognito, it's purely to make your browser private against other users of that computer. It doesn't do anything for it's Google storing that search or anything like that. You're not opting out of anything other than it just being stored locally on your computer. So not really news, but it's probably news to somebody.
Do you recommend any tools or browser extensions for if you actually do want to keep your stuff private? Besides a VPN or something like that?
I mean, I just would use, it just depends on, I don't actually. I mean, for
I have
Fire,
a pretty good one.
I mean, yeah, please do. So there's always Tor browser or something, but for I just assume that if I'm using Chrome, for example, everything that I'm doing is being logged to my Google account if I'm signed in. And if I'm not signed in, then it's going to try its best to just tag my IP address and then gather data that way.
Yeah. Besides using a VPN, one thing I found useful for isolating data collection are these multi-account containers, which is basically just an extension that allows you to create a virtual session for certain tabs. So for instance, I have this one that isolates Google accounts. This one, wait, I probably shouldn't show this actually.
Yeah.
They have a few interesting words there.
Sure.
But basically you can isolate different social medias, so they don't have access to each other's metrics that it's gathering locally on your computer. There's of course stuff like VPNs to obfuscate data from if you actually want to hide stuff.
Yeah, so of course changing your IP address is a good idea, but what you were mentioning seems like an even better idea, making sure you have different profiles for accessing different things so that they can't start to connect each other, because that's how a lot of this stuff is kind of connected behind the scenes. All right, let's go into U.S. Department of State Department has started scrubbing their websites of contacts for Afghans and civilians, but of course all this stuff has been indexed multiple times by the Wayback Machine. So it just makes me sad when I see people like in the government doing stuff that doesn't like help that much. It just like assumes that also other people also don't know how the internet works. This article is frankly too depressing to click on, so I'm going to move on. All right, so I had a little poll up because, and this is still open because I've been having a discussion about whether or not iMessage is really end-to-end encrypted if before the other recipient is able to see the message, it is decrypted and scanned for content. A lot of technical people say, hey, if it leaves the phone encrypted and arrives at the phone encrypted, then even if the messenger that you are sending it through mandates that it be decrypted and scanned, that is still end-to-end encryption, because I guess we're only talking about telecommunications companies.
No.
The fact that you created like an intercept protocol that like you're the one who has created the phone, the messenger, and the scanner, and then bundled them together so that they are inescapable. To me, that doesn't sound like end-to-end encrypted. It sounds like you've used end-to-end encryption in only the most technical of aspects, and then opted yourself out of the bad guy list, and instead added like a surveillance tool that could very easily be modified, changed, updated, retargeted without your consent or without you noticing. Just put that right in the middle and decided to create an environment around that. So that's my argument for like why I don't think something is really end-to-end encrypted. If in the service you are using, it forces it to be basically intercepted and scanned before the user is able to see it. Of course, some other people have brought up like, you know, if you're using Signal and there's a third-party intercept at the other end of that, like looking at it when it's unencrypted, of course that doesn't mean that it wasn't end-to-end encrypted. That means that there's an interception happening after that. But, you know, having it go from Signal to something else completely is very different than Signal building in a scanner that has to scan your message before you can open and see it. That, I think, would also probably make some people say that that's not really end-to-end encryption in the spirit that most people mean and interpret it as. So feel free to weigh in on this. There's some polls going on. A lot of people feel like no. Again, I respect the opinion of people that say yes. Like, you know, if you feel like it's just for telecommunications companies, then maybe you're technically right here. But in my opinion, would be in the worst way, because like it doesn't actually help people keep their stuff private. And for all the reasons I mentioned, retargeting, repurposing, people requesting other things be added to the list, hash collisions, just everything. It just seems like a bad idea. So here we are having this discussion about what end-to-end encrypted really is, because now we're talking about content scanning. So if you're curious about what this debate was triggered by, then obviously the new iMessage scanning is kind of what this discussion is about. That attempts to scan messages for content that might include nudity, and then alerts parents, or it's still kind of confusing. It depends on the age of the person. There's like a bracket for like less than 13, over 13 but less than 17, and then it either notifies the parent or it forces the child to, I think, like consent to it, and then it stores it somewhere. You know, there's issues with this like up and down. Like one thing I keep coming back to is that algorithm that like kept thinking that like sand dunes were like forbidden. So like imagine like you're like stressed out, you're coming home from work, and you have like 27 notifications from Apple that like your child has received like a pornographic image. You open it and it's just sand dunes, you know, like that. I just feel like this is not a good idea. So this is kind of maybe for the Q&A. We can discuss it a bit more. But yes, this is a discussion that's still ongoing. If you want to weigh in, feel free to weigh in on this poll on my Twitter. So far, 123 people have voted, and 80% of people have said no, it's not really end-to-end encrypted if something within the same protocol is able to intercept and read it before the intended recipient, but maybe you feel differently. That's okay. All right, more depressing news. So biometric data is another form of surveillance that we might not have to deal with as much in the United States, but in Afghanistan, they certainly utilize iris scans and other types of rather invasive biometric surveillance in order to positively identify people in ways that are difficult to change. So in this case, data can be very dangerous when it's intercepted by the wrong people, because now some of these databases that are linked to people that might have been helping the US government are in the hands of people who might really want to find them. So this is just another indication of why data is so dangerous. When you collect information or you have surveillance data and the wrong people get a hold of that infrastructure, something that was a really useful tool for one organization can be something really, really dangerous in the hands of another. So just kind of a reminder that when you build something that collects data or is capable of intercepting data before the recipient gets it and scanning it maybe, then it's very likely that at some point someone might want to abuse that. And yeah, again, if you want to see more about this, the EFF has gone out, and I'm going to post this link, and talked more about what the privacy implications of this mass scanning idea is. Of course, the intention is a crime-fighting strategy, but really there's lots of problems here. And again, I've been waking up like every day thinking of like new reasons why this is not a good idea. So I'm going to drop this in here, and yeah. Okay, so let's get into some of the reasons why privacy experts are not super psyched about this scanning idea. So the scanning relies on something called a neurohash. And someone was able to find an early version of this already embedded in iOS 11.3 and later. They exported it and then they managed to rebuild it in Python. So that means that the hash that Apple's going to be using for this is actively being analyzed, and people are trying to figure out ways of breaking it or ways that it might be abused. So the question was, how many months until there's a GAN that creates innocuous images that are detected as something that it's not? And the answer was not very long. Sorry, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? All right. I'll find it. But let's just say somebody has created a image of a dog that successfully creates a, oh, it's here. Sorry, I just had to scroll down. I was looking everywhere. Okay, all right. So this adorable puppy also happens to have the exact same neurohash as this hideous monster.
What?
Right? So, I mean, if you have this image on your computer, obviously you belong in jail, right?
Sure.
Like, this is, like, why would anyone have this? It's disturbing. I don't like it at all. So clearly this is something we want to keep off of people's computers, and computer scientists have created a hash to identify any time that this is on someone's computer, because they probably need help. So what if someone just sent you this happy little dog and you saved it 37 times to your computer by accident?
You go to jail.
All of a sudden, you know, Apple gets 37 notifications that you're into some dark stuff. So like this, I mean, people are trying to poke around here and find different ways that this can be exploited and different ways that you can abuse this. And the fact that, you know, this adorable puppy generates the same hash as this hideous monster is just one of the ways that this system could fail. So if people were able to create collisions with this hash in this short a period of time, this easily, then we can expect that this will be actively targeted and attacked at some point, because the system just allows for a big loophole in the promise of end-to-end encryption when it comes to communications and anything that might be stored on a phone. So again, the neurohash is not being applied to iMessage. That's a separate scanning thing that's probably going to zero in on sand dunes. We're, in this case, talking about the kind of scanning that's going to be on devices and on iCloud. Basically anything that's stored on the device will have the scan go through it and make sure it's not, you know, an image like this. All right, so giving a shout out to Alex, who has taken great pains to put on the exact same outfit as in this thumbnail. Thank you, Alex.
Takes a lot of effort.
Right? We try to coordinate our streams pretty well. You can see his latest episode on Hack 5 here, which I will pause and then go to on YouTube just so you can see it. And it's doing really well. We just released this yesterday. It already has 9,500, and only 5 people hate it, which is pretty good. Because the 584 people would totally beat them up. So.
Count me in, though, for the dislikes. I hate this thumbnail.
What?
No, I'm kidding. It looks great.
Yeah, this thumbnail is one of our better thumbnails, I think. The last one, though, was obviously one of the best we've ever done. But yeah, so if you want to see... but I'm not going to describe your episode. Alex, what is this?
So basically, I demonstrate how to use a $5 microcontroller to gather Wi-Fi reconnaissance in place of a more expensive setup. So like running some reconnaissance software on like a laptop or something, having to like set up a whole Linux terminal and like programs and stuff like that just to gather Wi-Fi recon. I show you how you can use the ESP8266 in place of that. If you want to start logging like Wi-Fi data around you to detect like people that you know that are nearby based off their cell phone, just other stuff you can do with like monitor mode.
Does this one show signal strength as well?
Yeah,
Cool.
it shows like signal strength, encryption, packet types, so you can use that to flag like beacon frames, probe requests. You can see if someone's running a deauth attack. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the library that you could use to create basically any sort of packet monitor. So if you wanted to create like a deauth detector, you could use this promiscuous library to just look for that type of packet. Or if you wanted to see if any device is getting like really close, you could basically look at signal strength. So there's lots of different ways to use this to make it basically a generic Wi-Fi sensor kind of, and then you can decide on how you want it to act. Yeah. That's super cool. I think, does Stefan, does Space Hoons, deauth detector use this? Do you know?
Not the same library that I cover here, but I think his interface is like with the raw like SDK that comes with the ESP. Yeah. This is a more high-level API that I'm using.
Okay, cool. All right, so just more about the Apple. I'm just gonna drop this in the chat. If you guys want to read another good article about why this is a bad idea, there were some researchers who made a hash that was very similar to what Apple's using, and they concluded that they shouldn't use it. So after like working really hard on making this and then testing it and seeing what its capabilities were, they were convinced that it was too dangerous to use. And they were pretty surprised to see that Apple had gone ahead with doing this anyway, even though it was incredibly similar. So if you want to get the perspective of some people who actually like made a system like the one that Apple's using and decided that they didn't want to use what they had created, this is a great article. And reading through it and really like made me reflect a little bit on what it's like to like make something and then just decide like, hey, I don't want to live in the same world as this thing. So yeah, definitely interesting to read. And I promise I will stop talking about this particular feature. I just hate it. So in lieu of the robot video I was going to show this week, I'm just going to show this comic instead. We've all hopefully seen the Boston Dynamics robot showing off its like tactical abilities this week, jumping around and whatnot. Just made me think of the Terminator just running straight at me. So I'm going to try not to contribute to that video going any more viral than it already has, any more than I already have. But let's just say I am not looking forward to seeing that robot on the street at all.
I like the first one. He's kind of cute.
That's the problem, Alex. That's the
Cody,
freaking
no.
problem. That's how they get you.
No,
Do you-
I would let him
see-
roam the street.
What?
If I could pet him, I definitely would. I'd
This
just
is
be
why
like, "Oh, he's
humans
a
are
little cute
doomed.
robot."
Yeah, but what happens when they attach tentacles and lasers to
Even
it?
better. Do you know how cool that is? I'm
What it-
kidding.
No. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So look for that robot on your city streets in 2030. I am again not looking forward to it. All right. So Alex, do you know what a geofence warrant is?
With context clues, I would think it's a warrant that companies, or rather like the government, could get to gather information about like your location through some data set.
That's
I'm not
pretty
sure.
good. That's pretty good. So working on context clues alone, Alex has got almost the exact definition. But yeah, so basically a geofence warrant means that, hey, we want all data about users who were in this specific area at the specific time. And that data could come from Android phones, that could come from applications that are on the phone that are feeding GPS coordinates back to someone. You know, there's lots of different apps that will request GPS access and then continually use it, whether you know it or not. So if any of those report back to Google, then you have a scenario where it's possible that authorities can just create a general area and request any data that could tie somebody to that specific place. So this was very famously used in the Capitol attack, where they wanted to figure out anybody who might have been within the building who wasn't supposed to be, and they went ahead and used Google accounts to figure out anyone who had a Google account that was pinging their GPS location during that time that said they were in the building. And that's how a lot of people got arrested. So these sorts of warrants are really, really broad. They sweep up anybody who's in the area, whether they were doing anything wrong or not. And of course, there are ways that there can be problems or errors with this as well. So it's just worth noting that these sorts of warrants you would never really know that this had happened to you, that you'd been included in a geofence warrant. You would only kind of find out like if something were to happen from it. So it apparently doesn't really take much for somebody to request one of those geofence warrants, because 8,369 of them were requested in 2019, and there were 11,554 in 2020. So like if you want to figure out who was in an area, searching in real time is not your only option anymore. You can do, like we said, automated license plate scanners. You can also pull Google account information to figure out if anybody with an Android phone was pinging in that area at that particular time. You can go through the cell phone towers and find out if anybody was connecting to that cell tower in a regional area that wasn't usually there. It's like there's multiple different layers of intelligence that police agencies can use to try to track down someone or try to find people in a geographic area that have absolutely no warning for the people who are being surveilled. So this sort of surveillance is invisible, it's prevalent and pervasive, and like it really doesn't allow people to opt out, other than just not using these products or trying to be more aware of when your app or your phone or something else might be tracking you. So obviously these ones do require warrants. So unlike automated license plate scanners, which the databases just typically require a reason and not like a warrant, at least there's a little bit more of a barrier. But the problem here is still that there's lots and lots of these warrants out there. And a lot of people say that these are unconstitutional, mostly because they sweep up lots of people who have done absolutely nothing wrong in a surveillance dragnet and then store that information in ways that it could be used against them in the future. That's something they never consented to, and they never did anything wrong to deserve it. It's just a side effect of the way that this type of surveillance works. So yeah, people don't really like that, because it means you could just be walking down the street and then be included in like a terrorist suspect database just because like your information has basically become part of an investigation because you were somewhere that was swept up in this particular investigation. And then maybe that data was used in a different investigation. You know, you never know what's going to happen to something once it's been recorded, which is why, you know, the courts try to make it a legal process for people to do dragnet surveillance or just broad surveillance so that it's not used against everyone all the time. This is in some ways dangerously close to that, because when you just select a whole geographic area, you're including lots of people who had no reason to have that surveillance done to them. And that over time becomes a bigger and bigger issue. And as we can see, it's becoming a bigger issue just because of the dramatic increase in the amount of these warrants that were actually approved. Just another story on that. If you want to learn more about this, you can see from the Google service announcement exactly what the breakdown of these warrants were. And you can see that they're clearly going up. You can see that they are for state jurisdictions primarily, but federal jurisdictions like some as well. You can also see which states are doing this the most. So California loves geofence warrants. It's their favorite. Whereas like Texas, Florida, Michigan, Georgia, also huge fans. New York, it's kind of interesting because I think, you know, New York probably and California should be kind of on par, but it seems like it's just maybe more of a West Coast thing. So you can also download the supplemented data as a CSV if you want to do that. I do not, but you can see more of a breakdown of the types of requests that were received that they're able to legally disclose. Again, this is, a lot of people see it as dragnet surveillance. You can set up an entire area to be surveilled for like a relatively long period of time, and you can do it retroactively. So you can go back in the past and do this sort of surveillance, which is why it's sketchy. It's just very sketchy.
Definitely.
So even if you don't drive your car, avoid all cameras, and manage to evade all the other types of surveillance, your Android phone or your Google account might be the one that ends up selling you out and makes it so that there's a record of where you were or where you were going, no matter how sneaky you think you are. So that kind of thing catches a lot of people, and in this case, it looks like governments and police agencies are increasingly relying on this sort of data to solve crimes. Okay, so that's actually all we have for this week. I didn't get my usual briefing from Zam, so I'm sure that we are missing a couple things. But Zam, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. And also thank you to Firesnake and everybody else who was in the chat, although I will request that you stop making hateful cryptozoology comments towards Michael. He is on a quest. Let him do his thing. If you guys have any stories you think we should cover for next week, feel free to leave them in a comment on the YouTube show. And then also, if you have any questions, maybe from this broadcast or from any of our other streams, then you can go ahead and leave them and we will answer them on our next Q&A stream, which should be on Tuesday. So hopefully we see you all there. Make sure to subscribe and also hit the notification bell if you want to know when we go live. And we'll see you next time.
Adios.
Bye.